Just want to say welcome, everyone, and we're going to be digging into the latest in privacy engineering today. And so maybe we can just start with quick introductions. Lori, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, I guess we were already introduced 10 minutes ago, but yeah, I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and I direct our privacy engineering master's program, and do research that focuses on the human side of security and privacy. And I spent some time at the FTC in 2016.
Great. And I'm Ben. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the data privacy infrastructure company called Transcend. Started this company about 3 years ago with the mission of making it simple for any company to give their users privacy choices. For us to start out, I'd love to maybe just do a quick audience prompt if I can get that working on Hopin. Do we have that? Yeah, okay, so just in the stage chat, would love to just hear any privacy engineering topics that you'd like for us to cover in our session today. Any technologies worth debunking, so please feel free to use the chat to mention any topic you'd like for us to discuss. For example, whether it's something related to the UX around consent or even things like differential privacy. We'd love to just dig into any topic. So please feel free to keep this interactive with that stage chat, or sorry, the event chat. So yeah, maybe it would be helpful just for us to start with setting a bit of context, Lori, and sort of setting the stage for why this is relevant right now.
Yeah. Privacy engineering is an emerging and growing field. Some of us have been doing it for a while. So some are brand new to it. About 10 years ago at Carnegie Mellon, we started having companies reach out to us and say, do you have any students who know about privacy engineering we could hire? It was kind of little trickles of that. And we decided to set up a master's program. And so we went back to those companies and said, well, what are you expecting these students to know? What do you think privacy engineering is? And, we got responses, and we keep going back and asking that question, and we keep getting different responses over time. So I think at this point, we don't even fully have a full consensus on what does it mean to be a privacy engineer, but we have kind of this evolving notion that this involves expertise that's technical as well as expertise in really understanding privacy and some legal issues surrounding privacy, but you don't have to be a lawyer, and understanding the context and the human aspect of it. And I think, as we have more privacy laws and there's been more highly publicized privacy incidents, organizations are saying, yeah, we really need people who understand all this stuff, and we need a privacy engineer.
Yeah, that's a great description. Yeah, I would agree. And obviously there's this huge rise of consumer privacy rights right now, and particularly the new set of data rights we're getting through modern privacy legislation. GDPR was one of the first big sweeping modern privacy laws, and it was the first of many that would soon follow. So CCPA, LGPD, as well as new bills and laws being passed around the world. And within each of these laws, there's a whole new set of engineering requirements and requirements around how data is treated as well. And really things that never truly existed before. And within most businesses and organizations in general, data has been collected pretty broadly and put into systems across hundreds of different data systems, if not thousands. And so we've spent 20, 30 years building these information superhighways that collect data. And for the first time, the world has to actually start building the highways back to the users where they have these controls and they can start saying, I want to delete this data or I want to see a copy of it. But none of those roadways are built to go in the other direction right now. And it's actually very difficult. It's not as simple as the collection, because a lot of that data is difficult to even find. So that's the type of problem that I think about the most there. And yeah, it's never been more relevant. Nearly every engineer or organization I speak with is having this problem right now. There's a lot of data that's been collected for a very long time, and it's very difficult to understand where that data is, how it's flowing, and ultimately kind of put users in control of that information. So yeah, it's an exciting area there.
Yeah, what you said about the difficulty in providing that access to data. Now 20 years ago, the FTC had a working group that I was on. There were about 40 of us on it, and we were supposed to look at the fair information practices and what sort of guidance the FTC should provide on it. And I remember when we looked at access, it was really difficult, and people said, we can't find all the data in companies. And then even if we can find it, how do we know we're giving access to the right person so that we don't, give to somebody else's data? And 20 years ago, we all kind of threw up our hands and said, well, this is a really hard problem. But now there are laws that say, it may be a hard problem, but you have to do it. And so we have to actually figure out how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe just from like the UX side, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your work thinking through how to actually present these consumer choices and really helping users actually discover these types of actions.
Yeah, thanks. We've been doing a lot of work at Carnegie Mellon on trying to make usable privacy interfaces, and so we started by trying to understand, well, where are consumers having problems? We did a study of 150 websites, and we had our research assistants go through and find all the places that you could make choices, where you could opt out, where you could ask for your data to be deleted and whatnot, and count, like, how many clicks does it take, and how difficult is it to do this? And then we brought in participants into our lab, and we had them try to opt out. And of course, it was even harder for them than it was for our research assistants. And so then we've been looking at, well, what are ways to make this easier? And so we've been involved in trying to come up with redesigns of choice interfaces, trying to figure out how to present them very simply. Also looking at discoverability, because a big problem people have was, where do I even find these choices? On some websites, it's in the privacy policy, but sometimes it's like completely buried. Sometimes it's not in the privacy policy, it's in the settings, it's in the account settings. You can only see it if you're logged on. And so trying to come up with ways to make this easier is something we've been looking at. And one of the big principles that we've been focusing on is consistency, standardization. If people knew that there was one place they could always go to find these choices, that would make things a lot easier. We've been looking at consistent language. We've developed various types of kind of nutrition label approaches to presenting this information. We've been working on icons. So I think all of these things can help.
Yeah, it's amazing how these consumer rights, like what the sort of status quo is right now of how to exercise rights. So if you go to like almost any privacy policy of almost any company, it's typically the channel through which you submit a request to access your data or delete it, for example. It's usually through email. And so you would actually email basically the privacy legal team directly, and you'd say, you find the privacy policy, scroll down to like section 13 of it, and it will say your legal rights, and then it will say, if you would actually like to exercise any of these choices, please email us at privacy@thiscompany.com. And usually that's pretty indicative of a very manual process that they don't want to run. And so to actually get to a place where you can have that button that's just like easy to click on, easy to like exercise these rights, and something that like as a company you're willing to make easily discoverable. It requires like having everything prepared behind that button, right? So actually being able to process that choice without having without sort of kicking off like a wild goose chase within the organization to find that person's data. And that does happen. Like we often see businesses who will have just like thousands of these emails piling up. They're all in plain text, so someone has to read them and basically say like, okay, this looks like it's an access request, but it's like sandwiched in between like, you know, paragraphs of other text, and then they kick off some sort of manual workflow, right, where they may have to shoulder tap people across different organizations just to ask them to log into their respective systems and actually download this user's data and then email it to the privacy lawyer, who then compiles it and then sends it to the user. And so all of this is to say, I think companies and just the industry in general needs to like really work on the data problems in order to really get to this place where users can actually exercise these privacy choices. And yeah, it's ultimately like that sprawl problem where hundreds of vendors and hundreds of different data systems. So yeah, it's a huge problem there, but I'm excited for where things are trending there. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some focus areas and latest trends. Did you want to kick that off, Lori?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, we've been looking at what are ways to make these things easier for consumers, as I mentioned. And one of the projects that we worked on recently was with the state of California with their Do Not Sell My Personal Information link and icon. And, you know, we saw in the CCPA legislation that the link could be accompanied by an icon, we started wondering, well, what is that going to look like? And so we actually spent some time kind of brainstorming different kinds of icons. And you know, we've done work on privacy icons before, and they're really problematic because privacy is not a real visual concept. You know, after you move beyond eyeballs and shields and locks, which are already overused, you know, it's hard to represent privacy for people. We actually ask people to draw pictures of privacy, and we have a collection of hundreds of pictures, which are really cute, but didn't answer the question of what should be the icon for privacy. And so we decided to focus on the idea of opting out and of choice, and then the representation of do not sell my personal information. Can we turn those concepts into icons? We worked with some designers, we developed a bunch of icons, and then we said, all right, well, you know, we have our favorites, but we really need to know, what do, you know, people who are not us, who are not privacy experts, what do they think of these things? Sure. And so we did a bunch of user testing. We used crowd workers, and we put these icons in front of people. We asked them what they thought they meant with the tagline and without the tagline. We found without the tagline, most of these were completely, nobody understood them. And with the tagline, some were better than others. And then we tested different taglines, we put them together. We did a study where we took people to a fictitious shoe store website. We showed them the icons and taglines, and we asked them, what would happen if you clicked on this? So through this very iterative process of collecting user data, we were able to come to some conclusions about icons that seem to work better than others. So we recommended this blue stylized toggle icon, which really seemed to represent choice to people. The California Attorney General then responded by recommending a red toggle icon that wasn't so stylized. It actually looked pretty much exactly like a toggle. And people said, whoa, like this looks like it shows state. How do we know if it's on or if it's off? I'm afraid to click on it. So we ran another study. We compared that to what we'd actually recommended, showed that ours was a lot better. Yeah, there is a small risk of some confusion, but a lot less confusion with the stylized toggle. The California Attorney General then said, okay, we just aren't going to have an icon. And we did some more work for them in evaluating icons. And then finally in December, they came out with a recommendation actually to use our stylized toggle. There was a public comment period. We're still waiting for the final results. But we think this is actually a pretty good direction. And not only would I like to see California using this for do not sell my personal information, I would offer that you should put all your privacy choices and options under this icon. And we don't need to have a different icon for New York and for Washington. Like we should all use just one place to help consumers find their privacy choices. So yeah, that's some stuff that we've been working on, and I know you've been doing some similar kinds of ththings, Ben.
Yeah, we think a lot about that centralized place for privacy choices. So it's actually very complementary. We don't focus so much on that initial discovery, and I think having an icon and that place where users can go from the actual property. So, for example, the website or the app or whatever, however they're interacting, and the place they land in is something that we help build, which is we call it the privacy center. And from the privacy center, end users of Transcend customers can come in. It's like privacy.thatcompanyname.com. It's always consistent in that way, and those users can see all of their privacy choices right there, and then with a click of the button, actually exercise those choices, as well as sort of authenticate themselves and make sure that they have the right rights to the account that they're requesting access to. That's always a very important part about like actually putting an automated process around these data rights. There's huge security components to this where the right of access is a very powerful tool, and it's a very powerful right. So you want to be like 100% certain that the person claiming access to someone's personal data is in fact that person. So we focus not only on the interface for users to sort of exercise these choices, but to make sure that they're securely authenticating themselves, and moreover that that they're actually getting their data in a very secure way. So we actually, for example, in an access request, one of the main sort of security concerns is that we're basically compiling data across all these different sources, and in a naive implementation of that, it could be a very dangerous thing to do, to have one party have access to all these different systems, be it your financial account or like your user profile or analytics or support. There may be very sensitive information in there, and so we don't want that to be a dangerous process. And so we actually sort of restarted a lot of like our own architecture in this and rebuilt Transcend in a way where we would have zero access to any of the information or privileges into the systems. And we actually get all of the exported data to the user in an end-to-end encrypted format. So basically, we're sort of like a signal service, if you will, between the company and the end user. And so in that privacy center, there's a bunch of really interesting technology that I geek out on that basically downloads all this encrypted data from the company and then decrypts it right there on the user's device. So there's a lot of stuff packed into that website that you may not realize that when just looking at it, but it's definitely a focus for us to try to think about and build a place where users can just like come to one spot for one company and they know how to get there. Or I think with the help of your icon, I think they'll get there much better, but at least we try to just keep it consistent on the URL. So privacy.whatevercompany.com. And yeah, so it's something we're looking at almost every day. There's lots to talk about on the security side, but I know I've been kind of rambling, so I'd love to maybe just hear about you. I know you've been doing some interesting work on inclusive privacy. I'd love to sort of dig in on that as well. It's something that we're thinking about too. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this is really an area that we're just starting to look at, but I think it's important, and I think in the research community, we're starting to see people who are doing some great work in this area and looking at questions like, how do we provide privacy rights to people who are vision impaired? We've relied on people reading privacy policies, looking at icons on the screen. If you can't see any of this, how can you have these privacy rights? This has been a problem for a long time outside the internet space, just things like secret ballot elections. And some of the voting system vendors have had to come up with ways so that visually impaired people could use a paper ballot where they would actually use texture on the ballot, on the piece of paper to help with that. And now with electronic voting systems, I know in the county where I vote, and I've been a poll worker, you can put on a headset, you can listen to your ballot. It is the most god-awful user interface. It takes like 15 minutes to go through and listen to the whole ballot, and our ballots are not very long in our county. And I could just imagine in like California where you guys have like tons of stuff on your ballots. And it's just not a very usable interface. And so the alternative is that you have to have a sighted person come like vote for you, right? And you lose some privacy. And then we've been hearing other stories of other things that you don't even think about. I heard this great story of somebody who was visually impaired and said she wanted to use a pregnancy test, and she had to have a sighted person look at her pregnancy test. I mean, that just seems like such a private moment, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do to really think about how to make privacy more accessible.
Yeah, that 100% true. In the compliance requirements, that there are accessibility requirements, and I think they are often still like more overlooked than they should be. And so, getting some sort of framework that I think is not only accessible at the individual level, but at least somewhat consistent for like across different companies. And so, it is an example of the icon. I think having consistency in the way that these choices are discovered and the way that they're exercised is incredibly valuable, because it really is, if it's a totally different implementation and discovery, it becomes very difficult to keep that accessible. And then, I mean, furthermore, it's also complex. Like going into any company, we were discussing this a little bit. It's like your privacy choices are so scattered across all these different systems, and you may have like 15 different settings that affect your privacy, and it's just raising the barrier to actually exercising these. And so having a clean, consistent place where things can be centralized and highly accessible, I think just makes the most sense.
Yeah, we've also been looking at the role of automation here, and some people argue that even if it's at the same place at every website or with every IoT device or whatever, I have to go visit all of these websites, all of these apps, all of these devices, and that's still a lot of work. And once we start looking at devices, I have to like walk by all the light bulbs and whatever, and find out what data they're collecting. Like, no, that's just crazy. And so we've been looking at what can you automate here, and the idea that you could have a personal privacy assistant. And so that assistant could be software running on your smartphone or on your watch, and as you walk through space and you encounter devices that are collecting your data, behind the scenes, it can be having a conversation with them, finding out what data is being collected, finding out your rights. And you could have some, basic policies, and you can say like, okay, I don't care about smart light bulbs that just detect my presence as long as they're not also like taking a picture of me and recording my voice, right? But if I walk into a space where there's voice recording going on, I want to be, start vibrating, let me know immediately. Right.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing, we have the technology to do that, but we need some coordination and some standards to make that sort of thing happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that would be difficult to do with like even harsher legislation, and it may be coming. I don't think that's a totally crazy thing to say. I think privacy laws will get increasingly strict over time. Yeah, because you would have to still have the technologies be kind of committed to that degree of notification, and sort of like joining like it could be like an open standard, for example. You can always build a device that was, let's just call it like in that world, it would be like the evil example, right? Where it just records without notifying anyone. And so you may need like a regulatory piece that lets users have that. But it may also become commercially the right thing to do. And I think we're actually pretty close to there already, just in general, where actually being a privacy conscious company is an incredibly strong thing for one's brand. And the like poll after poll and study after study have shown that consumers will favor businesses that they believe respects their privacy and actually and that they can actually trust. And a great case in point, of course, is the Signal and WhatsApp phenomenon, where WhatsApp had updated its TOS and users started flocking out to end-to-end encrypted messaging services. And I think we're sort of just at the dawn of this, where as new expectations or as consumers expectations start to like recalibrate toward, wait, I actually can have more privacy here, and privacy is like not this thing that like we lost anymore, it's actually something that we're gaining. I think we're going to see a lot of incentives come in for businesses to actually start adopting these types of standards. And so I think if someone were to build that, I think that there's a very solid chance it could get traction even just on like brand trust. You could imagine a scenario in which like all of the most trusted brands are on there, and then anybody who's not, consumers are just going to be suspicious of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, we're prototyping it at CMU. We're also developing IoT security and privacy labels, and I'll put out a plug that if any brands are interested in piloting any of these things, get in touch. We have some pretty worked out ideas that we'd love to actually try with some real brands.
Yeah. We have a question or a comment from the audience, question here from Curtis. What about the push from governments against strong encryption? I have a lot of thoughts on this. Larry, do you?
Yeah, why don't you start, Ben?
Okay. I am strongly against this concept of regulating encryption. It's basically like making certain types of math illegal, and fundamentally it's such an important part of security and privacy that to try to regulate this technology would honestly decrease everyone's security, and it would decrease our just like essential freedoms. It's really something that does protect. It does protect people like journalists that are blowing the whistle on something. And the U.S. has awful whistleblower laws right now, and so for us to simultaneously crack down on the encryption, it basically makes it almost impossible to report wrongdoing, and in general, it's just like it's an essential tool of privacy. If you want to have a conversation with someone, it's pretty reasonable to expect that you should be able to have that conversation without having it recorded essentially, or being included in a dragnet that the NSA has or whomever. And so even if you think the NSA has your best interest in mind, there are many other actors out there who are also pulling dragnets, and so to regulate it is a little bit over the top in my opinion. And I know that there are reasons why law enforcement ought to be able to understand what is happening on the internet at times, but the reality is this came in as part of like anti-terrorism, right? And there's never been a story about how they busted someone because of their messaging. This is the type of thing that they would be celebrating if there were. And there's a really interesting case, I think from the Ninth Circuit, that was released in September. I'll try to link it in the chat. But basically, they concluded that this has never worked. It's never done anything valuable for our freedom. So it's basically just like a loss of power.
And this debate has been going on for like 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm strongly against any regulation here. UX question for Lori.
Let's see. Apple is pushing hard on similar approach to the nutrition labels. Is this a game changer moment, do you think, for privacy choice awareness? Yeah, I think this could be. We first did a study on nutrition labels we did Android apps about 10 years ago. And, we wrote the paper and published it, and, nothing happened until last month, and now Apple is doing nutrition labels for apps, and it's about time. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of devils in the details of what they implemented and whatnot, but I'm going to be really interested to watch this and see how well it works, how they respond to any problems, and then if others try something similar.
Great. We should wrap up now. We're getting the 1 minute warning here. So maybe just to conclude, Lori, if everyone takes only one thing away today, what would that be for you?
So I think that if you want a good privacy user experience, you actually have to test it with users. That's my takeaway.
All right. For me, I would say that making data rights exercisable it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also just the smart thing to do. It's making things that are fundamentally easier on your company, less resource heavy, and builds great trust with users. So I would encourage everyone to look at the data rights that are available in these new laws and see how you can make them exercisable for your users. Okay. Well, with that, thank you so much, Lori. It was great chatting with you again, and looking forward to the rest of Data Privacy Day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.